This Michael Cohen threat to a reporter caught on tape and newly exposed. New reverberations on that tonight. Later in the show, a Yo MTV Raps takeover of Fallback Friday. I don't think you want to miss that. Also, two special guests live on the beat tonight together for the first time, Rob Reiner and Anthony Scaramucci. They're here, and we have a lot to talk about. But we begin with some of the more serious news right now. The former Attorney General of the United States under Barack Obama, Eric Holder, issues this serious warning about what he is concerned, based on his knowledge and his sources and his relationships, what he's concerned is about to happen.
I suspect that we are on a path where there's going to be an inevitable clash. We're going to get to a point where the Justice Department simply will not go any further. I think Rod will not go any further. And something's going to happen. I don't know, who gets fired or what happens, but we're going to be, buckle up your seatbelts. We're going to be in the middle of some kind of crisis.
We are heading for some kind of crisis. Mr. Holder alone knows why he feels now is the time to tell everyone that's where he thinks we're heading. Some context? Well, it's something we've been reporting on last night, and that has concerned legal experts and a lot of citizens around the whole country right now. Donald Trump is openly floating pardons for obstruction of justice.
I think the president is trying to send a message to some people who potentially might be involved in the Russia investigation.
And you know who's backing up that interpretation tonight? Of all people, Roger Stone, of course, under scrutiny in this probe, saying that this whole thing is to send a signal to Flynn and Manafort and even Mueller, indict people for crimes that, in Roger's view, don't pertain to Russian collusion, and these pardons is what could happen. And then Stone goes further and says, quote, referring to Mueller, the special counsel has awesome powers, as you know, but the president has even more awesome powers. Just consider how brazen that statement is alone. A Trump advisor who's worked with him longer than most, currently under investigation, is openly warning the man leading the investigation. That is something. Of course, Trump fanning the flames with talk of using the pardon power for this man.
That Sinbad, that son of a bitch. No, he's a great guy. Oh, thanks. Please believe me, I've been fired before.
Linked by The Apprentice, the guilty former governor of Illinois, Rod Blagojevich, was famously caught on tape. We've heard a lot about tapes lately. He was caught on tape trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat.
I've got this thing, and it's golden. And I'm just not giving it up for nothing. I'm not going to do it. And I can always use it and parachute me there.
I'm not going to do it. Meanwhile, consider this context tonight. Over 10,000 people have applied to Trump for pardons or reduced sentences. They filled out the paperwork. They abide by the process, many of them in for nonviolent offenses. As I mentioned last night, many of them African Americans in a system that has many systemic injustices. I can report to you as fact, I don't mean this to sound rude, but this is what all the facts are stacking up to tonight. Donald Trump's not thinking about them in this process. There are signs he is looking at the pardon power only on behalf of his own interests. I'm joined now by New York Congressman Gerald Nadler, ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, an important person in this debate. Maya Wiley is former counsel to the mayor of New York City, and Nelson Cunningham, a former federal prosecutor who worked with Rudy Giuliani and was general counsel in the Clinton White House. Quite a panel. Congressman, I will begin with you. Do you agree with Eric Holder's analysis of where we're headed?
Well, it's quite possible. It depends how brazen the president is. He's musing about, well, first of all, he has been threatening Mueller, threatening Rosenstein, threatening and improperly pressuring Sessions, trashing the special counsel's investigation with blatant lies. He's been doing everything he can to do two things. Number one, to discredit the special counsel so that when they comes out with a report, people don't believe it. But number two, trying to intimidate him and trying to intimidate the special counsel and to trash him. Mm-hmm. I think that trying to intimidate the special counsel will not work. Hopefully, the country, when the special counsel comes out with a report, it'll be very well documented. I'm sure it will have a lot of evidence. Whatever it says,
let me ask you, when you say not work, what do you mean? You mean that federal offenses may also have state criminal liability, so justice will be served that way? Or you mean that there'll be mass pardons, but there'll be some other sanction?
I wasn't addressing pardons. I said hopefully the pressure, I don't think the pressure on Rosenstein and Mueller will work. And unless, I mean, one constitutional crisis would be if the president fired Mueller.
But what about pardons?
Rosenstein.
I mean, what we're seeing is these signals, no?
He is signaling that he will use pardons, and he is signaling potential witnesses. Now, that may or may not work, because he doesn't have to, and he might not necessarily deliver the pardon in the end. If I were Michael Cohen, I wouldn't depend on that, especially given what we know about how badly Trump has treated Michael Cohen, according to Roger Stone and several other people. But it might work. And the misuse of pardons, as the firing of Mueller, could create a real constitutional crisis.
I definitely agree that we don't know. It's certainly possible. We certainly are seeing the pressure tactics. Career prosecutors do not back down because there could be a presidential pardon. It's not the way it works. So the sort of Roger Stone threat of this is what the president is sending a signal that this is what he might do if you go after crimes that are not related to Russian collusion, meaning, you know, that could include Michael Cohen, thank you. But I think what that really says to us is, to the extent there's a crisis, it's really only if there's a crisis in Congress. Because if Trump were to go after Rod Rosenstein or any of the other career prosecutors by trying to get rid of them to continue to try to obstruct justice, then the question is, what does our other branch of government do? Does it step in and say, now that's a bridge too far, as we've had signals of, even though they haven't passed legislation to protect the special counsel, which I believe is the right thing to do.
Right, and Nelson, I want to play some more from Eric Holder, because I think the larger context, of course, is that Donald Trump is putting out all of this pressure. You have these reports that the federal prosecutors in D.C. are actively investigating Andy McCabe, who became a very public enemy of the president, as a potential witness to obstruction. They're now reportedly interviewing James Comey about McCabe as deputy. That's exactly the Twitter-driven divisions in the FBI and the DOJ that Trump wanted. These very public flirtations with pardons for individuals that, as we and others have documented, all overlap with the kind of crimes or allegations facing his own people, seems to be building a set of ways for him to cash this out. And then, of course, the ultimate is Rudy Giuliani basically saying, forget what they find, forget even if they find felonies that reach the highest office in the land. We ultimately think we can win an impeachment fight, which is an incredibly negative, cynical, one might even say guilty-sounding argument. And then Holder builds on that. Take a listen.
If you pardon somebody, all right, well, that means that they don't have much to worry about with regard to whatever the pardon covers. But if Bob Mueller, for instance, wants to take a pardoned person, put that person before a grand jury, that person no longer has the ability to say, I'm going to invoke my Fifth Amendment right. That's been stripped away. You have a pardon. And that person then becomes a perfect witness for the special counsel.
Nelson, your analysis.
Yeah. So I think we have to bear in mind two things. One, where is Trump going? And I think he is getting ready for some kind of a showdown or a crisis that could happen as early as this summer, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's look at what he is pardoning people for. He pardoned Scooter Libby, who perjured himself and obstructed justice by lying to investigators. He is threatening to pardon Martha Stewart, who went to jail for lying to investigators and obstructing justice. He pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, who engaged in campaign fraud, just naked campaign fraud. He wanted to give a political friend $20,000. He can't give that much, so he funneled it through some friends. He pleaded guilty. And the last thing, he wants to pardon Rod Blagojevich, who, as you pointed out, gave away his office for as much as $1.5 million, which was what he demanded of Jesse Jackson's campaign. He is sending the message that, you know what, lying to prosecutors, not that big a deal. Obstructing justice, not that big a deal. Campaign violations, not that big a deal. Mixing your office and money, not that big a deal. So it's both a message, I think clearly it's a message to these witnesses, but it's also a broader message that some of the basic tools of prosecutors, perjury prosecutions, obstruction, the basic operation of the law just isn't that important. I think he's doing this to condition himself for a clash that will come, as Holder says, quite soon. I wrote a piece in Politico this week that suggests that as soon as this summer, when Mueller finishes his investigation, puts out a report, that report winds up in Rod Rosenstein's hands. That is the moment that Trump is building toward. How does he keep Rosenstein from releasing that report?
And so in that analysis that you just laid out, which is quite useful and educational, does it matter whether Bob Mueller knows a lot more than Donald Trump?
Well, the prosecutor in a case like this always has the advantage. What we know about the investigation right now is a fraction of what Bob Mueller has known for months and months and months. Mueller goes in, he's had every email, he's had every written document, he's interviewed hundreds of witnesses, he's obtained massive amounts of tax returns and bank statements. This is just the way a prosecutor works. He goes into any confrontation with Trump knowing much more than Trump does.
Right.
And that is, of course, an advantage for the prosecutor.
And I think, Maya, that goes to a key part of this face-off, which ultimately is about Trump and Mueller circling each other. And I wonder if, I don't know if you've been following the Drake-Pusha T feud this week, but I wonder if Trump is more in the Drake role, hitting very hard, but not actually knowing what Pusha T or Mueller has in return. And if there are things that Mueller knows that he's willing to release later that could still detonate the Trump-Drake figure here, then it's dangerous to hit hard if you don't know what the other side has.
Trump is reckless, so I don't think he's thinking about it in that strategic a way. I think he's thinking about it absolutely in the sense of build up to how am I creating both the public perception that this is a ridiculous investigation in the first place, but secondarily the message to folks, I will pardon you, don't cooperate with Mueller, even if he comes after you and even if he gets you, I've got your back. The reality here, though, is he doesn't have anyone he can pardon on Russian collusion. Not sure how he's going to send that signal. But I think the point is they're not really circling each other. What's happening is Donald Trump is circling Mueller. Mueller's just putting his head down and getting the job done. And that's why he's got 19 indictments.
And I think with all the trashing that the president has done, 13 active Democrats, et cetera, the fact is the Mueller investigation has gotten, 19 indictments, a few guilty pleas of some substantial people in Trump's campaign. And there have been no leaks from that investigation.
Right.
All we know about the investigation is what's come out in court, what they've released. And I think that when Mueller is ready with a report and he gives it to Rosenstein, Rosenstein has proven himself, I think, throughout this a patriot, and he's going to make sure that that report is released to the public.
That it will not be squelched.
That it will not be squelched.
To Mr. Cunningham's report.
To Mr. Yes, I think that report will be released. It should be released. That's key. I mean, one of the things Trump is trying to do, and Giuliani and all these people, is to so poison the public mind against Mueller and everybody, and the FBI and the DOJ, so that people don't believe the report.
Right.
But depending on the strong evidence in the report, et cetera, I think it's going to be probably a very devastating document. Where you go from there, we'll see. But again, remember, he can't pardon people who perjure themselves subsequent to a pardon. I mean, he can do another pardon later, but if he pardons them for what they've done to now, and they're then called in and testify without being able to invoke the Fifth Amendment, that's another problem for him.
But then it's just pardons on pardons on pardons.
That starts getting beyond probably even the ability of Republicans in Congress to rationalize.
Congressman Nadler, Maya Wiley, and Nelson Cunningham, thanks to each of you. Coming up, the special event I mentioned, you can see it on your screen, Rob Reiner and Anthony Scaramucci together live for the first time on The Beat. Why would you want to miss that? Also, what those Michael Cohen threats may say about how Trump does business and what else is on the tapes. Later, Trump prosecutors busted for actually hiding tapes that could have proven the innocence of protesters in the resistance arrested at the inauguration. An important story we want to bring you. And then, yes, the Fallback Friday takeover, Yo MTV Raps. It's a 30-year anniversary tonight. Dr. Dre and DJ Scribble are here. I'm Ari Melber. You're watching The Beat on MSNBC. Tonight, the White House under new pressure to explain whether Michael Cohen is still even Donald Trump's lawyer, and the leak of this tape not helping.
I know you. I don't need your opportunity, you little. I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly what you do, and I know exactly the story you plan on writing. So I'm warning you. Tread very lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be disgusting. Do you understand me? Don't think you're going to hide behind your pen, because it's not going to happen.
Look,
I'm more than happy to discuss it with your attorney and with your legal counsel, because you're going to need it.
Cohen had once promised to write a tell-all book where he would say no issue is too big, sticky, or oddball for him to tackle. I saw it all, handled it, and still do. The newly leaked tape, though, doesn't look isolated. Consider another example where Cohen picked a fight with college students who were trying to prank Trump. One of the students got a fiery call from Cohen and relayed how he said, "I'm going to come up to Harvard. You're all going to get expelled. If this photo gets out, you'll be out of that school faster than you know it. I can be up there tomorrow." You'll notice there Michael Cohen combining a little threat with an open schedule. Now, the student went on to tell 60 Minutes this was terrifying, and if you're a student, you see how it could be. He thought Cohen might actually be, quote, crazy enough to fly up there. Cohen also reportedly tried to, quote, fix an issue when Trump reportedly lost, and this is true, this role to Mark Cuban in Sharknado 3.
I thought your policy was to save the sharks.
Nobody attacks my house. This time it's personal.
A producer relaying that Cohen went, quote, ballistic, screaming over the phone, "How dare you? Donald wanted to do this. We're going to sue you. We're going to shut the entire show," I think he meant movie, "down." I'm joined by Gwenda Blair. She has interviewed Donald Trump numerous times over the years and is the author of Donald Trump, the Candidate. And Vox's Liz Plank is here as well, who's covered many parts of some of these stories involving Mr. Cohen. I don't know where to begin, so Liz, go ahead.
I mean, that tape actually makes Tony Soprano sound like Mother Teresa. And it makes it clear that Michael Cohen was never really Trump's lawyer. He was Trump's fixer for two reasons. First of all, in the rest of that tape, he says that you can't rape your spouse, which is obviously not correct.
Legally untrue in most states, including New York.
Absolutely. So he doesn't understand the law, and he's also not speaking in, legal speak. He's speaking in threats. And so he doesn't sound like a lawyer. He sounds like a mobster.
Sounds like is, don't know. I think everything goes back.
And we're done. You know what? And we're done.
You can finish it right
We're
there.
good.
You can go back to the school of Roy Cohn with a little bit even further back to the school of Fred Trump, Donald's dad, who told his sons to be killers. Win at all costs. Then, so Donald grew up with that idea. Doesn't matter what you do. Just win.
So you say that, and like many of these types of stories, there isn't a part of it that is ridiculous to the point of bizarre and funny, and then there's a part that's very much not funny, and we are straddling that line. You say sounds like there is. Jay Goldberg was Trump's key top litigator before Cohen, and even he, when we had him on, because we make an effort to get on all sides and people with primary experience, even he talked openly on this show, take a look, about Cohen basically being very close to helping Donald Trump allegedly deal with the mafia. Do you think Michael Cohen's job at times was to keep the mob away from Donald Trump?
Well, if he says he was a fixer, then the question is, what did he fix? And what needed fixing? What needed fixing was relations with the mob and shakedowns by the mob so that there be no strikes and there be labor peace at all costs.
How does that match with your reporting on Donald Trump?
School of Roy Cohn, whatever you can get away with. That was what he learned from Roy. I mean, he already knew this, but Roy took it to the next level. When I was doing my book, a really interesting conversation with a real estate lawyer and a guy named Eugene Morris, who happened to have been Roy Cohn's first cousin, and had worked for Fred Trump, but was also Roy Cohn's first cousin, and had introduced Donald to Roy, or it was early on in getting the two together. And Eugene told me afterwards, Donald, it was like he was attracted to the fact that Roy had been indicted, that this guy had really taken it, that far.
You're saying he liked it?
He liked it. That was, according to Gene Morris, who was Roy Cohn's first cousin, and was around the two of them, and said he thought Donald really went for that. And immediately, as soon as he met Roy Cohn, right after that, the Department of Justice served the Trump Organization with a complaint about housing discrimination. Fred Trump had a similar complaint in Cincinnati, made it go away quietly, not Donald. Next day, they have a press conference.
No, they went on blast. They were very aggressive.
Blasted back.
And on that, I want to play one more, Liz, one more part of the Michael Cohen tapes. Take a listen.
You write a story that has Mr. Trump's name in it with the word rape, and I'm going to mess your life up for the rest. For as long as you're on this freaking planet, I'm going to turn around. You're going to have judgments against you for so much money, you'll never know how to get out from underneath it.
This one may have been overhyped, and Cohen had his hands full with the presidential campaign. But if these other tapes come out that the feds have, how many other situations like this over the years do you think pose exposure?
That's a really, really good question, and it really, shows how misogyny and the intimidation of reporters really work in concert in this administration. This story obviously regards Donald Trump's treatment or alleged treatment of his ex-wife. We have also the Stormy Daniels story, which you've covered extensively, trying to shut up or pay women not to speak about their relationships with Donald Trump. And then even Michael Cohen, this was during the campaign, a lot of people forget the whole Megyn Kelly debacle and him retweeting threats to Megyn Kelly.
Right.
And so,
which she said, she was at a different company at the time. She's now at this company, of course, as full disclosure, but she said that led to her having to get extra security measures, that those threats led to other people taking steps that reached that level.
Yeah, there are real life consequences to this. And as a reporter on the campaign trail, I felt it. Donald Trump would insult us, and that had ripple effects to his audience. They would throw things at us, follow us, and so this is serious. This is really serious business.
Gwenda Blair and Liz Plank, thank you both for your insights on this story and all of its permutations. Up ahead on the beat, I mentioned UMTV Raps is back on MTV, and we have Dr. Dre and DJ Scribble taking over Fallback today. But first, you're looking at live pictures at the beat. Rob Reiner and the Mooch. You can see them talking. Look at Rob. Look at that. They get along so well. Is that good? Whoa.
Now
yes.
we're getting along. But
right now.
On the air, he's going to hit me. He's going to hit
terrible.
me.
You know what, Rob? This is not planned, but can you say something nice about the Mooch before we continue?
He throws a very nice dinner party, which he did in Las Vegas.
Sounds like the swamp. Mooch, can you throw it back?
I love the guy. We were together on the gay rights initiative. We worked very hard on that together.
Well, look, I want you guys to walk away from the sofas towards the table. We're going to debate what Trump is doing for and to America when we come back in 60 seconds.
I'm looking forward to it.
Our other big story tonight, a special conversation on the Trump presidency live with two unique voices right here. The legendary Rob Reiner, filmmaker, actor, and activist, and Anthony Scaramucci, who served as Trump's White House communications director. They're going to talk to each other, not at each other. Now, this morning, Donald Trump took some credit for good jobs numbers as well as low unemployment, a trend that, when you look at the statistics, did start years ago initially under President Obama. Also, Donald Trump imposing new tariffs on steel and aluminum. There's imports from the EU, Canada, and Mexico. There are allies there, and people say they may retaliate. Also, open questions about Donald Trump and whether he is moving ahead or stalling out on some of the many big goals he set.
Everybody's got to be covered.
Universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody.
We are going to rebuild our infrastructure. We have bridges that are falling down.
When it comes time to negotiate the cost of drugs, we're going to negotiate like crazy, folks.
Do you believe in raising taxes on the wealthy?
I do, including myself.
Rob Reiner and Anthony Scaramucci, thanks for being here together.
It's good to be here.
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
He's got a great new movie coming out.
Shock and awe. But let's talk. It was interesting you played that. Listen, all candidates make promises and they don't keep them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happens with you played all the things, infrastructure and better health care, and they didn't get. So you would say is that a lie? Is not a lie? He just made a promise he couldn't keep. What I want to know from Anthony is that, and you are, I know Anthony from, he runs Skybridge Capital. He had a big thing in Vegas. We had a nice dinner together, and he's like a straight shooter kind of guy. I want to ask you, because you know Donald Trump. I met him one time. I don't know him that well. You know him better than I do. Why do you think that he lies all the time? Why is that? Why does he lie every minute?
So this is sort of the point I was trying to make in the green room. There's different shades of that. Now you're going to say, okay, he's trying to parse it. I'm really not. He is an embellisher of stories. He is a macro wave surfer, if you will, and so he will tell a big tale and a big story, and so now the media is conflating that with absolute lying. He's not sitting there saying in those 3 or 4 sound bites things that he didn't mean.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to
one of those sound bites.
I'm trying to differentiate a campaign promise from going out and saying something that is demonstrably not true.
So when the media says he said 3,001 lies, okay, we look at it, the guys that were in the campaign and people that I'm close to, and we see him as the macro storyteller that he is, and you guys get upset because he's the president. But in Hollywood, when you've got a book that's a nonfiction book and you're going to write the story in the screenplay, some of it gets conflated.
Right, but that's Hollywood. That's Hollywood. We're making up stories. But when a guy says that the FBI is spying and infiltrating my campaign, and you find that is a total and utter lie, you're creating a narrative that's making it difficult for people to accept the truth when the truth comes down.
Ari's got a picture of McCabe on the desk here, and so we know that the Inspector General's the Inspector General's
I have a picture of McCabe. That's true.
I don't know him personally, but what I do know is that there were some things that happened there that were not what the Inspector General thought.
Well, before we go deep, and we can go deep into the Inspector General report, which would make a great Hollywood script. You can option it. Let me say this. I'm going to go back to you.
I defended Rod Rosenstein. I went to law school.
He's asking about the deceit. Do you think Donald Trump tells the truth most of the time, part of the time, or most of the time not the truth?
Okay, so this is what happens when you come on a show like this. I'm getting boxed right now, and what you guys want me to say is, oh, no, he's a liar, and say other thing. I know him for who he is, okay? Yeah. And his base knows him for who he is, okay? And so there's an expression sometimes, it doesn't translate perfectly into English, but sometimes you let a story get embellished and the facts go a little bit away from the story. That's what the president has done, okay? When the president talked about the Trump Tower in 1980, he had it as a scintillating, spectacular tower, and then it ended up on Vogue magazine Paris, and he's a big dreamer, he's got big ideas, and he's an entrepreneur. And so what happens, though, in the media, he's the president of the United States, he's very unorthodox, he's a very unorthodox communicator, he's not communicating the way the other 40, or at least the ones in recorded history have communicated, and people are super upset about that. But
how about that? The argument there being that he puffs it up.
Here's my issue.
You can puff it up if you want. Style. You can puff it up if you want if you're in the real estate business and you're overselling something or whatever. But he's now the president of the United States, and when he says something, it has to mean something, and it has to be true. You can't just say that we had no contacts with Russians. There's no.
I'm going to cut it. We're not even going to do Russia right now.
No, I'm not talking.
Let me do this.
I'm talking in general.
Let me do a chart.
I didn't think we had contact with Russia.
I
didn't see it.
Let me do a little economic Rorschach for both of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the chart I'm about to put up, you felt boxed, and I appreciate you sharing your feelings with me. You know that always.
Yeah, there's no couch here, though. And by the way, I tell my shrink I was there for 954,000 seconds.
It's all about how you look at it. I'm going to put up something that will also box Rob, because it is something that
I love to be boxed.
Here you go. Donald Trump may be benefiting from what Barack Obama started in the unemployment rate. But this chart tells a story that Obama started something good, if you think that unemployment dip there is good, right? More people getting jobs. And it's continuing under Trump. So starting with you and then turning to you, can you acknowledge that this is a good thing happening during the Trump administration?
Sure.
And can you acknowledge that it started actually under Obama? Starting with you.
Yeah, well, of course it's a good thing. It's a good thing that we had over 200,000 jobs created last month. Those are all good things. And the unemployment rate that is going down, that's a good thing.
Because sometimes it seems like, and I'm going to say this, you people in Hollywood, and you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, me.
Literally you.
Personally.
And you know I like you.
I know you do.
Cannot admit a single thing positive that's happening in this country during the Trump administration. There is a perception of that. So now you're standing up and saying no to that.
No, that is positive. That, you know, the one thing that we look for is, are wages going up? Are people going to have more in their pockets? Those things are matter. And if you don't have health care, more is going to come out of your pocket. If gas prices go up, more is going to come out of your pocket. If you have a tax cut that isn't very substantial, you're going to wind up with less.
And
so those things are not good.
Can you admit something that Donald Trump clearly has a big problem with, for whatever reasons we can explore, that he is building domestically on all of these successes that Barack Obama built over 8 years, especially on the economy? He seems unable to acknowledge that, which makes it very hard for him to speak factually about these numbers.
I'll go one step further than that. Okay, during the economic crisis, President Obama had to make some crisis management decisions, and by and large, he got almost every one of those right. You were on the brink of an actual international calamity, and so he got just about every one of those decisions right, and so that calmed down the world, and then he got the help from the Federal Reserve. Where I think President Trump does deserve credit, and I think this is where the Obama economy was a little constrained, frankly, was in the regulatory process. Okay, the layers of regulation and the lack of trust on these businesses, because there was some demonization post-crisis, taking those shackles off, provided that they're not over-tipping into under-regulation, okay?
But I think those regulations...
free market, but with regulation, because we've got greedy people in our society.
The regulation part of it could be good if you have a tax plan that actually helps middle-class people. But what you have is all the deregulation is geared towards big business, and the tax cuts were all geared towards the wealthy and big business. You had, corporate tax rates cut. You had, capital gains cuts. All those things happened, but what didn't happen is anything, redounding to the middle class guy. Okay, so I'd like to know what he put in place economically that helped the middle class guy and the regular guy.
I love this guy. So
which one helped then?
I'm going to help him out here.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. So some of that is perception, because there's about $263 billion that got downloaded to middle class people through the form of increased wages and bonuses. I think what people are at odds on that are Democrats is that it wasn't enough. I mean, that was Nancy Pelosi's thing, where she said they were crumbs or something like that, and people got upset because it's $2,000 of disposable income on somebody that's making $50,000 a year is a lot of money. But you have to remember what the president had to do is he had to go against two forces, the establishment on both sides that are not in love with him. And so what happens in Washington, you don't like to see how these bills are made, but it was very fakakta, to use a little bit of a Yiddish term.
Fakakta, see, he's Italian, but he's using Yiddish words.
You have to do that in New York. So it was a little bit of fakakta, okay? But let's say something else, okay? And I think also what the president didn't realize is that once the Obamacare went into place, whatever the flaws are with Obamacare, and you might love Obamacare, but even people that made Obamacare recognize there are some flaws.
They needed to be fixed, but what he did was he didn't repeal and replace. He just destroyed.
But
he's destroying Obamacare, and people are losing their health care, and people are are losing their Medicaid.
Not 100%. Okay, so some of that is true on the fringe, and that's what's got everybody so excited. Not 100%, but if the president said on 60 Minutes that I want to make the health care more affordable and I want to make the health care better, he can do that.
But what has he done to do that?
He can't, because he's up against the special interests and he's up against the lobbyists.
Well, if
the number one things you do is you just increase the supply curve if you're an economist, okay? And you incentivize people to become doctors, okay? You've onboarded 40 million people into the system.
Are you going to finish the chart?
No, he just put that in. He's playing hangman here. He doesn't have. There's nothing here. He's playing hangman.
Yeah, it's right there. You just flatten out the supply. You increase the supply of doctors. You had a GI Bill after the Second World War, which the American middle class benefited from. You need a medical GI sort of a bill.
Right. There's a lot of things you can
do. Let me
do.
play something that Bill. So you make a lot of interesting points, and what you're doing that sometimes, quite frankly, some of your former colleagues in the White House really struggle to do is you're working with actual policy arguments to make your points, which we appreciate and we welcome here.
I don't need to attack people.
Here's a problem that Donald Trump has, and it's a problem that comes out of his own mouth, which is the very numbers that he was hyping last night and today, the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, are the same numbers that he degraded throughout the campaign when he didn't like them. And this is a problem that is bigger than left, right, or whatever else. Take a look.
I hear 5.3% unemployment. That is the biggest joke there is in this country. That number is so false. And our real unemployment is anywhere from 18 to 20%. Don't believe the 5.6. Don't believe it. They show those phony statistics. The unemployment number, as you know, is totally fiction.
This fiction phony number is what he's selling today. Doesn't he have to retract that to be taken seriously by anyone?
Okay, so can I go first on this? So what he was referring to is there's a number of different ways to slice the unemployment. The number that is posted up by the Bureau of Labor Statistics is called the U1 number. That was at 3.8%. The U6 number is still in the high sevens, okay? And so what he was referring to back then, at the peak of the crisis, it was over 18%, the U6 number.
I'm familiar with the undercounting, but he's saying the numbers that he's selling today are phony. You know that.
So if I was his comms director, which I'm obviously not, he could rectify that by saying, listen, the U6 number was 18.
But he's not going to do that, Anthony. He's not going to do that because he's not going to tell the truth. He has an aversion to the truth. And he did something else today, which is against the law. He released these numbers before he was supposed to.
He alluded to them. He alluded to them.
Well, but he alluded to the fact they're going to be good numbers.
No, but the precision's important. He alluded to them.
Right. And do we know for a fact that he didn't tell anybody who's close to him that these numbers are going to be? Do we know what they did with? We don't know.
We don't know. Now we have 30 seconds. We want to end on a high note.
He's better in person than he is on Twitter, though. I do.
Yeah,
look at this beautiful.
A lot of
smile.
talk. There's been a lot of talk. Some would call it
not as angry. It's like a very.
Some call it speculation about you launching a television show with Michael Avenatti. You've both thrown some public cold water on that.
Yeah.
And so I guess the final question is, will the show be with the two of you instead?
Yeah, I would do that because I've got a hair advantage on him.
I got the better hair.
He's got a little bit. He's got a more perfect head. I got way better hair, but the head's more perfect. But I would do that with him. He's a little bit smarter than me, but I think I could take him in a show.
Well, he's smoother. See, look, he wears that suit and he goes like this and he touches you a lot. He does that thing that Macron did with Trump. He's always touching you.
It's a choosing a time. I'm going to kiss him off the air.
Is it the power? Did he give you the power handshake?
Not yet.
Did you hold it?
It's all good.
But yank me forward.
I just want to say, I want to say one last thing.
Here's Trump. I'm Trump now.
Where we are in agreement is that we both worked very hard on the Marriage Equality Act. Yeah. Okay,
I know that.
Both worked very hard on Prop 8 together, and we were instrumental in the New York thing, and so I'm very proud of that accomplishment together. With
Anthony Scaramucci, Rob Reiner, first time on the beat. We hope not the last. Thank you very much. Up next, as promised, a very special fallback. Two legends from the hip hop show YoMTV Raps take over Fallback Friday. And now on the beat, a special edition of Fallback Friday. And yes, it's a takeover edition of Fallback. We have two legends from the great hip-hop show YoMTV Raps, which of course helped put rap on the map for many people in the 80s and 90s. MTV is relaunching the series with a kickoff concert Friday, and I am joined by the original co-host of YoMTV Raps, Dr. Dre, known for his work with the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, and Original Concept. Plus, DJ Scribble is here. He's an original from the pioneering show and is working on the relaunch.
We're getting ready to steamroller, so here we go with Ice-T and High Rollers on YoMTV Raps today.
We're going to kick it off right now. DJ Scribble on 1 and 2. We're going to start off with the master of the rap game right here. Rakim is in the house.
Yo, MTV Raps, thanks for being here, you guys.
Hey, nice to have you.
You're making me happy, and I think you're going to be making some people at home who grew up on you happy. This is exciting. We're going to get to what you guys are doing, but first, Dr. Dre, who needs to fall back this week?
Who needs to fall back in a big way? We got to get Roseanne to fall back. She got to fall back off the Twitter. She got to fall back off her thought process. She got to fall back, and we got to fall back and help her though. We can't separate her and isolate her. We have to let her know she's a part of the community. Her latest comments are helping keep things separated.
DJ Scribble, sometimes we see you in the background, back on the ones and twos on Yo MTV. Here you're in the foreground.
Yes, sir.
And you honor us with your presence.
Thanks for having me.
Who do you want to fall back?
The New York City school system. Well, actually, the Board of Education system in general. Because I have 2 children with learning disabilities, and they are in the middle on that gray area where they have dyslexia. My first son was originally diagnosed with autism, but then he came off the spectrum. But where they put them in the mainstream school, they don't fit. But they don't fit in a special segregated school either. So there's no systems really in place. They have services and stuff like that. We have to fight the Board of Education every year to get the funding because it's not a state board-approved school.
Any other fallbacks this week?
Roach milk.
I heard about this.
It's a real thing. Like soy milk or almond milk. I have one of the biggest phobias.
They say it has a lot of nutrients.
It's the one pet peeve that I have. It's disgusting.
Doctor?
What? The NFL, and I'll be really simple about that. Americans have the right to protest. It's our First Amendment right. We have a right to protest. So how a league all of a sudden can sit there with the owners and say, no, they don't have a right to their constitutional right in the First Amendment Bill of Rights is beyond me.
How did founding Beats Music with Apple change your life?
It didn't, because I didn't found Beats with Apple.
I'm just playing.
I know
he was joking.
I know that. No, I know.
There was a joke.
He didn't let me finish.
Okay.
But it was okay.
I think it went over your head.
You want to do it again?
No, it didn't.
No, you know what?
No.
We'll run it back.
You didn't do the punchline.
When they run
I used
record?
to do comedy at Caroline's, yes.
All right, let's run it back. I don't usually do this, Dr. Dre. I'm going to run it back.
Drip, it's Flashback Fridays.
I'm going to run it back and say, Dr. Dre.
Yes.
How did founding Beats Music change your life?
Oh, it changed my life. It made me say, I need a check from grapes.
And how often do you get misrecognized as Dr. Dre on paper, on the internet?
All the time. It's happening now with the show. I mean, it's like, why is Dr. Dre at the bottom of the list? I'm like, it's Dr. Dre and Ed Lover.
Excuse me, Squirrel.
Oh, you want to answer? Well, I was just trying to help you.
No.
Really?
I don't need help.
This is the way I like
it. You're okay. You do a great job at the show. Thank you very much.
What does Yo MTV Raps mean today?
Yo MTV Raps means it was an iconic, legendary show that really outlived its inspiration in the beginning, because the first hosts of Yo MTV Raps were Jam Master Jay and Run DMC, and that happened at the Nassau Coliseum at the Def Jam show. It was Def Jam tour, I believe it was, where Public Enemy was there, Rob Bass, DJ Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince.
Yes. Dr. Dre, I'm shaking your hand right here.
Yes, sir, Ari.
DJ Scribble.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you both.
For having me on.
Thank you, Ari.
We're already seeing some reactions rolling in. I'm seeing them on my phone. What do you all think of Rob Reiner and the Mooch on the Beat? Do you want to see them back here again or not? And do you want to see them launch their own show? You can tell us on Twitter or on our Facebook page, The Beat with Ari. Let us know. Maybe we'll update next week.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes from MSNBC. You know, every day I come to the office and we make a television show. And every day I think to myself, there's so much more I want to talk about. And so this is our podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening? And the whole idea behind it is to get to the root of the things that we see play out every day. They're driven by big ideas. Each week, I sit down with a person uniquely suited to explain why this is happening.
New episodes of Why Is This Happening every Tuesday. Listen for free wherever you get your podcasts.